Welcome to the importance and power of reading. I'm Michelle, the computer lady, your host. During some awful dark times in America, Black people were denied the ability to read, to learn how to read, to write, or to even own books. And that has hampered our communities up until this day. Now we're going to have important conversations about the importance and power of reading. Hi, everybody. Today I have an epic show for you. It's so amazing, I can hardly wait to get started. But let's talk about us reading books. Now, kids do what they see us do. So let's make sure that we're modeling to make sure that our kids read. Now, I don't want to delay this any longer. We have the CEO of Good Foods, Mr. Andrew Emil Johnson. Mr. Johnson, oh my God, it is so awesome to meet you. I have been following you guys for a while. Would you tell everybody about what you do, about your company, and how you and Good Foods are changing the way we eat and how healthy we can become?
Yes, thank you, Michelle, for the invite. Love the show. And my name is Andrew Johnson. As you mentioned, I'm the CEO of Good Foods. We mainly produce canned beans and vegetables. And our whole mission has, always been for the last 20 years, started in 2003, has really been supplying, our communities and underserved communities with the highest possible nutrition, we can. Traditionally, many of us are in underserved areas where there are not a lot of healthy options available. And we actually started selling through the government in the early days, and family owned business, and sort of transitioned into retail, and here we are 20 years later. So thanks again for allowing me to share my story, Michelle.
Oh, that is absolutely awesome. So you guys have been doing this for 20 years, you say?
Yes.
And now we're just hearing about you because your whole family is involved in your operations. Is that correct?
Yes. We have about 4 or 5 people, five and a half, how family goes. um, and people dip in and out. But yeah, about 4 or 5 family members that have committed, over the last 15 years to just really pushing the brand. And so I'm a little I'm excited, but I'm also a little down because you just hearing about us, and we've been in the shelf for 20 years. But a lot of that has to do with just us and how we rolled out the product, and us starting really in the government sector, supplying the Chicago public schools with breakfast cereals, and then later to providing all the WIC centers in Chicago with everything from fresh produce, canned goods, frozen, anything you see in the supermarket, we were really supplying. And then kind of what happened was at a certain point, my father said, "Hey, why don't we brand this under our own name, Good Foods?" The word "good" actually stems from my great 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 aunt out of Louisiana. She had Creole roots, and the E is silent in good. And so my dad, and I were sitting around like, "Hey, what should we name this brand?" It kind of just popped up. We wanted something with the word "good" because that just brings a lot of high quality description to what you're selling, but we couldn't do good. So we found, hey, well, why don't we add an E? Oh yeah, it also happens to be a family member's name. So that's kind of how the brand was created.
Well, that's absolutely awesome. Now, I found out about you guys about a year or so ago. Can you tell everybody where you are, what stores you're in, so they can look for your products?
Yes. So we're in all Kroger's, Myers stores. You can find us at Jewel Osco in Chicago, all the Walmart Midwest stores, and you'll be seeing about us in Food Line, which is if you're out on the East Coast, about 1,100 stores, and then we're rolling out with Target and Shaw's too this summer. So look out for us in those stores as well.
Now, folks, just in case you don't know about Good Foods, this family-owned operation, no GMOs, no preservatives. So they're making healthy food to make sure that we have healthy bodies. And parents, you know how important it is to feed our children good food. Now, Andrew, let me ask you, did you like reading as a child?
I did. I think what what really happened to me was, and I think all kids can relate, is I read what I was interested in. Oftentimes, especially in the public school system, we're forced into reading things that may not be interested to us, or maybe might not even have any type of benefit to us in the long run. But there's a standard set. So I think when I was interested, I would read. You couldn't take me off a book that caught my interest. And that was nonfiction, fictional, especially growing up. I think now in my later years, I'm more into autobiographies, history books, and just understanding the history of how we got here. Community, culture, business, agriculture. And so, I've always been a fan of reading. I think it has transitioned more from make believe to now as an adult, two kids. I'm reading more self help books and prayer books, and just anything I can do to stay inspired and motivated.
Well, that is absolutely awesome. Now, you talk about books and you reading things that you were interested in as a child. What was your favorite book as a child?
My favorite book as a child, probably Goodnight Moon. Goodnight Moon. Yeah. I mean, this is like, 2 or 3 years old, but I think, you continue reading that book up to your, 5, 6. It's a classic.
Absolutely.
Right.
Anything that really ties you in and gets you interested, and the fact that you know it now as a CEO and adult, and it still takes you back to that happy place. That's what's important.
Right. Yeah. All the Shel Silverstein books, I'm 35, so all those early 90s, cartoons I was into. Where the Wild Things Live, you know. So I just like everybody else, I'm from the northern suburbs of Chicago. I was reading everything, And my mom's also, she went to Miami, Ohio, always big into reading, and was actually studied to be a teacher, ended up being a microbiologist. So we have very deep roots and just education. My grandpa came over here on a soccer scholarship, but really it was his academics that got him into NYU, and he later transpired to be the first Black doctor in South Florida, in Clewiston, Florida. So he had his first practice. So it's all full circle, and that's kind of where my dad had his mentality, and I'm trying to continue the legacy on from both of them.
Well, you're doing an absolute amazing job. So you talked about your influence. So who was your greater influence? Mom, dad, the community, or just you got it from the whole family? Because mom is great, dad is great, and I'm sure you got great uncles and aunts that have given you books, spurred your love of reading. But who influenced you the most?
No, that I think that's such a crucial point to really talk about is the influences you have as a kid, especially in our community, the African American community. What you see early on is what you're going to mimic and replicate and try to aspire to be. And early on, I was blessed, realizing that now later in life than earlier on. I think I took it for granted, just being in a being in a family that everyone, education's first. Lawyers, doctors. My aunts are, all have their own firms. So I grew up watching, all my aunts and uncles have their own businesses. And but then I also, on the other side, I grew up watching my mom and dad work in corporate. And so they, I saw them work for the man and have to maneuver through that corporate side of, you know, life, and especially in pharmaceuticals, which is where they started. They both worked for Abbott Laboratories, which is kind of a unicorn, right? In our community, you don't hear about this. I mean, they were the only minorities, in the building. This is a publicly traded company. So I saw how they had to maneuver, and how at a certain point they were even limited, about on how far they could go within the company, no matter what they brought to the company. as far as sales and just, attributes, they were capped. And at a certain point, I think my dad said, "Hey, not only am I capped at how much I'm working, I led this, my dad was in charge of bringing Ensure Pedialyte and Pedialyte to the market in the early 90s. And so he led the Midwest sales team that kind of expanded that category into like a multi-billion category. And, I think when it was over, he got a nice letter from the CEO saying, here's a, little check and vacation for you and the family. I think he said, okay, this is enough. If I can do this for this company, I can do this on my own. And so, yeah, I watched my dad start, his business from the ground up. 1 second I'm not seeing him, not any more normal than the other kids in the area, suburban area. But he was working corporate. But at a certain point, it got to, oh, now he's working at home, and I'm seeing him every day, and which was cool for our relationship, as we developed. And so, yeah, they were my mom and my dad. I saw them get up every day, go 6 a.m. till 8 p.m. at night. They're doing cocktail hours. They're doing whatever it takes to network and put themselves in a position to succeed and allow their kids to succeed too.
That is absolutely phenomenal. Well, as you know, we got to pay the bills. We've got to take a small commercial break, and we're going to be right back with the CEO of Goode Foods. Everybody, stay tuned.
Since 1877, Jackson State University has been training students for a life of service and leadership to impact our global society. Ranked among the best HBCUs in the country, Jackson State University offers 47 undergraduate, 37 master's, 1 specialist, and 13 doctoral degree programs. Whether you're interested in the arts, education, public health, the sciences, or business, we're here to take you from ready to JSU ready. Visit jsums.edu and apply today.
Hey, everybody, we're back. Oh my God, I have this is a phenomenal guest. His parents have been his motivating factor. Doctors, lawyers, his mom was going to be a teacher, but she ended up being a microbiologist, and she has spurred his love for reading. We're back with Andrew Johnson, CEO of Goode Foods. Andrew, I just love the fact that your family has always been at the forefront of making sure that you were educated, making sure that you had this positive influence. Nothing could be better. Now, let me ask you, you remember what age you were when you started reading?
2 to 3 years old. Yeah, I would say about 2 to 3. On my own, where I was like picking up the book and giving it to my mom to read for me, probably 3 years old. I was like, I was into it. Yeah. Yeah.
That is awesome. So you started reading because mom was reading to you. Then about 3 years old, you started reading, which is a really good age because then your curiosity, you're asking all these wonderful questions. Now, you told us what you were reading as a child. What are you reading right now, or what books would you recommend today for young men? Because you're what, about 35 years old?
Yes. Yes.
And how many kids do you have?
Two.
Two boys, two girls, girl and boy?
Two boys. Yeah. So
Awesome.
not a dull moment. But
not at all.
I would say, I got 2 books right here actually. So this is one book I'm reading. It's called .com Secrets. And another book I'm reading called Blue Ocean Strategy. And one more I'll just throw out there that I think every person should read is called Rich Dad Poor Dad. You probably heard about this one.
Yes.
But yeah, .com Secrets. I think just with everything going on, everything is online, right? We're checking our phone every 5 minutes. So whatever you're doing in this world, like you're on this podcast right now, even though your mission is reading, you have to be online. You have to be able to navigate through these platforms. So I think it's important to just learn about what is going on right now. I think we're in a stage where, it's almost like the early internet stage with all this AI and artificial intelligence sort of creeping into our daily activities. I think it's important to learn about that as much as you can, and I don't want to take any away from your podcast, Michelle, but for me, especially later in the years when you get busy, you get kids, it's I'm big on the audiobooks. And some people, they just aren't visual learners. Some people, they're more effective if they can walk around and listen to it. It just depends. And but I think whatever you do, just get into some type of form of reading. Now it's different than the 90s. You got all these audiobooks and ebooks and all types of different ways to consume. So as long as you're consuming the right content and you're bettering yourself, I think that's number one. I know in school it's tough. You're gonna have to do what is required, but again, even then, that is all gonna teach you how to be an adult later in life, because it's really telling you a format of how to do things and accomplish things. And so when the colleges look at you and they're looking at your GPA, that is all just saying, hey, I can get a task done in a required specific amount of time. And so I went to Loyola University of Chicago. I sometimes wonder why, especially now with all the information available online and Google. I'm like, man, did I waste? But one day I'll just say about this. I don't know if I'm going off on a tangent, but about college, just going on in college, it's more than just going to learn how to read or improving your reading. It's about networking and but also finding out what you like too. I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do. My dad was starting this business, at 17, and in the beginning we had no idea what he was doing. Right, cans. This is a 100-year category, 100-year-old category, one of the oldest categories in the grocery industry. For what all me and my sister knew is that my dad was home more, and that he had a bunch of samples of food in his office now. But I didn't really know until he started getting to the stores, and people are like coming up to me like, "Hey, I just saw your dad's product in the local Kroger or Walmart," and I'm like, "Oh, this is kind of cool now." And it became kind of like that. But yeah. Sorry, what was your original question? Apologize.
No, it's okay, because my thing is you're taking folks through your journey, and
Yeah.
that's important. And as we read, because you talked about books, Rich Dad Poor Dad, the .com secrets. These are all tools. And one thing I know, and I'm glad you brought it up, because you're a man. You read things that interest you, because most men like to solve problems, and you look like a problem solver. And because you were trying to find your way, it's like, oh, okay, Dad, now it's cool. I can relate to it. At first, you were like, well, he's home more. I like that part because I get to spend more time with Dad.
Right.
But as you grew and as you saw him grow, you're like, wow, we got our own food line. And people see the relevance. Also, not only do you have your own food line, it's nutritious and it's healthy. That's the most important part. But since you talked about the food line, I write STEM for kids. And we talked about books and you talked about audiobooks. Well, I have an ebook that's free. And anybody can get one. It's called Mommy Was an Entrepreneur. Your mom and dad are entrepreneurs, and I teach about smart mommies that teach their children about STEM. And this one, the mom is teaching her daughter about what her and her husband do as entrepreneurs to help them have a great life. So the stories tie in
Right.
absolutely amazingly. And thank you for all the books that you share for young men, because I want young men to see young men reading. And that's why it's so important. And the fact that you have two boys and they see you reading, they're like, oh my God, this is so awesome. I see Dad reading, they're like, Daddy, Daddy, Daddy. And all that energy, but you're like, okay, come on. So what books do you read to your kids?
Yes. I continue it on. All the books that are my favorite. And now, of course, you got YouTube, so these kids are on, Baby Bus and Gracie's Corner, but the same books. The stories don't change much. Um, they love Midnight Moon. They love Midnight Moon. That's probably one of the same ones that I read. But yeah, and then now they're into, learning books and all type of crossword, more interactive books too as well. But yeah, I really continued on. So Where the Wild Things Are, they're reading that too. These are all classics. Dr. Seuss, of course,
Of course.
yeah.
Now, as a professional, how
Yes.
has reading helped you in your career and on your journey towards greatness?
I think it's important. You have to be able to read if you're starting a business, especially if you're running the business for no other reason. You got to be able to read a contract. You got to be able to read terms. So reading and deciphering is a part of anything you do in life. Whether you're a teacher, some obviously professions don't require you to read, but it's something you want to do to have a better conversation and be able to converse with people. You discover a lot about yourself, and I think it's key now more than ever, especially before you go to sleep. I think for me, that's what's been good is it helps me wind down at the end of the day.
Oh,
They
absolutely.
keep saying less screen time. Put your phone down an hour or two. That's tough for me, just being a CEO, but and you too. It's tough for everybody. And so but I do try when I do read, it's usually at night, later in the night, and kids are gone to sleep, and my wife's doing some work. My wife's also the CFO, so we're always hustling, right?
Well, you guys are doing a phenomenal job. And so, folks, as he's explained to you, reading is part of everyday life. He reads for enjoyment, but got to know how to read a contract. He's the CEO. He has a lot of things that come across his desk. He has to be able to comprehend in order for them to make profits because businesses don't succeed without profits. And
Right.
if you don't read, you don't get the profits. All right. Now, we got to take another short commercial break, and we're going to be right back with the CEO of Goode Foods. Stay tuned. Look for Goode Foods at a store near you. Watch the PIC TV network, channel 1000. Are you a company, business, or service that believes in social responsibility? Would you like to make a positive impact? You can. You can sponsor this program and be seen by 2 million viewers on the PIC TV network. Call 770-367-1268 for more information today. Hi, everybody. We're back with the importance and power of reading, and I have the CEO of Goode Foods, Andrew Johnson, with me. Now, we talked about reading. We talked about how reading is important in your journey. What do you think the state of literacy is among our children, adolescents, and even our adults? And if you think we're not in a good place, how can we get better?
I think we're in a pandemic. I think the state of reading in our community is very low and kind of shoved under the table. I don't think it's really held to any importance. But I think it's also young people in general. I don't think young people in general like to read unless they like it. I think unless they're interested. But I think, like you said in the beginning of this podcast, there's a deep historical root into that. I believe, right? At a certain point, it was illegal. At a certain point, you could be hurt or worse for reading. It was a law against reading. So I think we're slowly getting out of that mentality. And anybody who says, "Hey, well, that was 100 years ago," I mean, that's embedded, you know, into generations. So it's all about us to break that and realize, hey, that was then, this is now, and you need to pass it on to your loved ones, because we're stronger together than we are individually. And I think it starts with reading. I mean, there's that very ugly old saying, I think if you want to hide something, from the Black community, put it in a book, and I always took that quote for what it was. And so I wanted to make sure that I wasn't doing that. And, anywhere there's something I think is necessary to read, I'm going to read it. But I think we're on a good track, because we have people like you, Michelle, who are pushing this agenda and continuing on with positive messages about, our community, and pushing reading and just educating ourselves. I think it's more important now than ever. I think, we're blessed to be in this internet age. 15 years ago, it would have been tough. I don't know how you would have maneuvered, but I know for us, it would have been tough, because like you found out about us on the internet. There was no internet back then. So these are very low cost avenues of getting the word out. So, we're in this age of internet, and there's information everywhere. So it's like no excuse, it's really no excuse. I tell my sister and family members all the time, when we might feel down, or there's a bad day, low sales, whatever the reason, shippers late. Hey, it could be a lot worse, right? And so our grandparents, our great grandparents are looking down like, hey, you better get your butt up and do something. It's like, with all this opportunity, you just imagine, like, that's all the motivation I need. Well, think about 100 years ago. What's the alternative? So it's like, we have everything at our hands. So there's no excuse now. You get your word out and figure out what you want to do. And also, you don't have to work for yourself. I know I'm the CEO and we have our story, but I worked for multiple companies before I became the CEO and got my feet wet, on the corporate side. So it's okay to also work for somebody and build wealth and educate yourself. That's one thing I did want to mention on your show, because I know a lot of times, especially in our community, which is unfortunately mainly led by hip hop, a lot of times, hip hop has so much relevance and influence on our young boys, and I think a lot of those people, they're these artists are looked at in the same realm as a apostle almost, these following. So it's like, if some of these guys would just get together and say, this is cool, I think you'll see a lot more people reading and talking about it and being excited. Like I've seen, Black Men's Book Club. I see Facebook groups popping up, and I'm like, really? So they're there. I think they've always been there. I think, but unfortunately, the media is not going to cover that. They're not going to give you a platform, right? They don't want to talk about, us expanding into 10,000 stores in 2 years and being only family-owned business, that's in the canning industry, right? We're competing with Green Giant and these monsters, as a private family-held company. So, but they rather talk about, artists who just got into trouble, in the club the night before. And that's all fun, that's entertaining every now and then, but let's find some balance. And so, I think it's there. You just got to look for it. One thing, anybody watching, there's more people like you than not. So you don't want to get steered away and just be focused on the media and what they think you should be, or what's pushed out as what's cool and popular, because there's a lot more people that are just regular people that just want to do regular jobs. Everyone doesn't have to be an artist or a professional athlete. Because unfortunately, that's what society has kind of pushed us into a box of, these are only 2 ways you guys can succeed. And so I think my duty really is more so than even, getting more sales and making us this, huge national worldwide brand is like telling this story is so important just for people to see. Because I know if I didn't see my mom and dad waking up, working for top tier companies, I wouldn't even know it's possible. My aunt had one of the biggest black firms in Ohio. These are things that you can't really teach. It's just something that, and so I know for sure I'm blessed, especially as I get out of my little bubble, the north suburbs of Chicago, and start moving around, went to college in another state, and wow, we're really a unicorn. So unfortunately, there's not many of us, but I think there's a lot more than there is being projected. And so I think it's just about us finding each other, getting together, and branding and communicating a common message like we're doing today.
Oh, absolutely. So, Andrew, just so you know, we're on the Pick TV network, and we have 2 million viewers. We only do positive programming because we're on Roku. A lot of people don't see it, so it's also on my YouTube channel.
Okay.
So we, like you, are trying to find a positive way to make sure that our community sees people like you and your family as you do great things for our communities and for our world. Because until today, a lot of people won't know that you are doing something phenomenal. You, your sister, your brother, your wife, your father started a massive legacy of making sure that not only are we positive, but we're growing food. We're doing sustainability. And that's what's so great about having you here today. Now, you're the father of 2 boys, and being a man, I find that a lot of men have a hard time quieting your mind because you talk about social media. What are the things that you do to make sure that your kids are exposed to reading? Do you have books in the home? Do you read to them every night? Do you and your wife expose them even to the business? Tell us a few points.
My kids, they're at a point, I say in the beginning, it was, I probably put books in front of them. So yeah, they have bookshelves in their rooms, and we have a bookshelf in my home office, and small one, downstairs. So there's books everywhere just laid out. And like I said, my mom is big on reading. So anytime she's going over, anytime the kids are going over to grandma's, let's pick up a book. No Gracie's Corner, no Baby Bus, no YouTube. But now they're at the point where they're bringing me the books and telling me to read, and that's kind of been a ritual. So I think you kind of turn it into a ritual. I think nighttime is always a good time. And it's usually calming and soothing. And so by the time you're done with the book, if they're not knocked out, they're about to be. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
I love it because I'm a grandma. I have grandchildren and great grandchildren. And one of these things I do is I always try to make sure they get a book. I always try to make sure they get something educational, but it has to be fun because if we don't make reading fun, kids aren't going to gravitate to it. And you talked about young men and how some of our artists aren't saying, hey, reading is cool. But we have to look at the artists, other artists like Denzel Washington. If you look at the movie The Equalizer, he gave that young man a book. He's like, hey, you do this, read this, and then I'm gonna put you to work. So there are so many men, as you said, they're black men book clubs, they're black boy book clubs. As we get into it, and the more we keep rolling out this positive message, the more we keep letting people see us read on the trains, on the buses, it's amazing. And the fact that you said, hey, I stepped out of my suburb, I went to other places. So people are going to see you and they're seeing what you're doing and how phenomenal you and your family are. I think you just spread the word to spread the buzz. Now, I've got another question for you.
yes.
See, I love STEM. As a writer of STEM, I know STEM encompasses the science, it covers technology, engineering, math. Your family is in agriculture. Agriculture is a whole science. Would you kind of go through a couple of the steps or a couple of the processes that you and your family develop to make sure that our food is good and how we get it to the supply chain?
Yes, well, the number one thing is, kind of stems back to our story is, us starting in the WIC centers. There was strict dietary guidelines that we had to follow through the USDA. So
So I'm going to
always,
ask you, explain to people what WIC are for the people that don't know and what the USDA is, please.
yeah, so the USDA is basically the government regulated organization that will put guidelines on, your food labels, what you need to call out on front of the can or packaging, what's allowed, what's not. And so they kind of regulate the food industry. And through that USDA, we were able to win a government contract to supply all of the WIC centers in Chicago through Catholic Charities, which is one of the biggest nonprofits in the country. And so my dad was on the board of Catholic Charities for years up until he's passing. But we've always been healthy, mission driven first. So no sugar added is a huge aspect of all our products. And it's funny because a lot of people will see us on the shelf, and we're a higher end price, but that's because we are a higher end product. And so
Exactly.
you get what you pay for. And I could add all types of sugar and preservatives into each of our cans. I could work with our farmers and say, hey, let's just throw all the junk that we've traditionally seen in there, but then it wouldn't be good foods. We wouldn't have that distinguishing factor, and we'd be going against everything that we grew up believing, as far as promoting healthier options. And so we do have a untraditional line too for conventional, because people are price conscious and we have to be aware of that. But if you're conscious about your health, we also have that all natural line where there's no preservatives, no sugar added, just clean, pure products. And we only use, our farmers are mainly in the Midwest, so about 2 hours outside of Minneapolis. So everything is grown. The soil is rotated quarterly. This is some of the highest quality soil you're going to find in America in that northern upper peninsula area of Minnesota. So it's thousands of miles away from any biochemical activity or any pollution. And so that really, goes into our sustainable practices, is just being transparent from farm to table, and knowing that there's nothing added in our products. And like I said, we could put a bunch of preservatives in there, and then we could lower our price and go and be in the shelf, as if we're the store brand, but we wouldn't be us, and we wouldn't be doing any type of service to our community, with that type of mentality. So we try to keep everything as fresh as possible and as healthy as possible.
Well, that's why it's so important, because sure, you can go and get the national brands, other international brands, but they're not looking at our total health. And on one of my shows, I had Moses West, and he talked about the 17 tenets of sustainability, and good food and organics was one of them. And so I'm so glad that you guys are bringing this to the market. I'm so glad that you are showing people the right way to make sure that we have healthy foods in our community, because that's one of the things that we fight is a lot of our communities have food deserts. Costs a little bit more, but you get more. As Mr. Johnson just said, you get what you pay for, and that's why we need to get good foods. Now, and the summary, because as we keep talking about reading and kids, my last thing is, you talked about having books in the home. How important has it been through your life cycle that you had books? Because with your mom being studying to be a teacher and being a microbiologist, your father was in pharmaceuticals. He worked for Abbott Labs, and I know about Abbott Labs. How important was that in your journey?
Oh, it was extremely important. And yeah, like you mentioned, and my mom and dad worked for Abbott Laboratories at the same time. And so obviously there was books all around. She's constantly studying. For her, it was initially, lab coat. She was in the lab actually doing the science, and later progressed to being more on the project management and the business side. But yeah, and then my dad, if you ask him when he was 30, he had always planned to start his own business. So, he was always progressing. He got his master's, did his undergrad at University of Cincinnati, got his master's at USC. And so there was constant just books, how to Black economics, entrepreneur, how to start your own business, how to win in negotiating. These are all. That's another book. I got one called How to Go from No to Go, and this is a great book. Highly recommended if you're looking for a read. How to Go from No to Go: The Magic of Negotiating and Winning Arguments. And so I think those are the two key things right now. You're starting to run a business or really do anything. It's like you gotta know how to maneuver online, and you gotta know how to negotiate. And if you use those two as a foundation, and then always be willing to learn and progress and never settle, you're gonna do well no matter what you do. In my humble
That
opinion.
is, and your humble opinion means so much because as a father of boys, you know how important it is to make sure that they stay engaged. And you know how important it is to read, and you know the power of words because you read contracts, you have shippers, you've dealt with the United States Department of Agriculture, USDA, you dealt with Catholic Charities, you got a government contract, you and your family. So you wouldn't be able to be successful without reading. And that is why we're on this journey today.
Yeah.
Andrew, you have been an epic and amazing guest. Good Foods is amazing. For everybody else, check them out on Instagram. Check them out because they give some wonderful recipes on the bean pie. I did the bean pie. The bean pie is amazing.
Okay.
So yeah. So my thing is
Yeah.
they're giving us healthy food, some wonderful recipes, and they know the importance and power of reading. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank
And
you
we
for
look
having me.
forward.
Thank you.
Hey, we look forward to seeing you on the shelf. So everybody, Kroger, Walmart, Lion Foods, give us a couple of other places because we're in the East, you're in the Midwest. Tell us some more.
Yeah, Kroger, Meyer, Jewel Osco, Walmart, Food Lion, Target, and Shaw's. Shaw's, if
There
you're
we
out in the
go.
Yep. So about
So, and it's spelled Goode Foods. Good Foods.
good
Nutritious,
food.
healthy, and organic. All right, everybody. That's our show for today. Thank you so much for your time. We had an amazing and epic guest, but he told you everything on this reading journey. He even gave you some really good books. Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He talked about .com secrets and how to negotiate. All of those things take the power of reading and knowing the power of and importance of words. I really thank each and every one of you for supporting my show, for supporting this broadcast, and we'll see you next week on the importance and power of reading. You know what's going on in our society, book banning, and over 38 million children don't have books in their homes. Join me for some exciting segments as we talk about the importance and power of reading with my guest, Miss Janice R. Johnson, Club Secret on the PIC TV network.
Black life, black inspirational stories, education, luxury, health features. Welcome to the new Black Television PIC TV network, where being in the black is luxury, it's accountability, and it's seeing what you look like in the new face of television. PIC TV network, come join us.